What is up, everyone out in the World Wide Web? This is Jesse with Viral Thoughts, and today we're going to be talking about the moral power of stories. All right, out there are a total of only 5 different types of stories. Now you're going to be like, what? Only 5? Yeah, we're talking about morals here. The 5 categories include whole, healing, bent, broken, and tangled. Starting off with the very first one is whole. Now, whole stories portray good and bad as bad, and good wins the end. This is where your typical Disney movie where, have the big bad and the big good, they kind of, go at each other and the good wins in the end. Examples would include Avengers, Star Wars, Tolkien, and most Disney movies. Young kids tend to need to have whole stories because when they're young, their moral compasses are still shifting and they're still malleable. So watching whole story and engaging in whole stories is going to be the most healthy thing for kids. Number 2 is broken stories. Now, broken stories is where good is good and bad is bad, but bad wins in the end. These are tragedies. They tend to teach lessons of how, why things go wrong and just failure in general. Examples of this would include Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, The Marvel's Infinity War, and Titanic. Those are some examples of broken stories that they teach lessons, how to deal with failure, and that bad things happen to good people. With broken stories, you actually want to wait a little bit longer for your kids to watch them because it's not a moral confusion, but you want to explain why good wins sometimes and why bad wins sometimes, and how we can deal with that and why we fail sometimes. The third category is healing. Now, healing could be either broken or whole. These are stories that move us, that change us, and shift our paradigm, our mindset. Examples would include the Bible, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and Dead Poets Society. These are stories that ultimately try to change us and move us and try to change our perspective on life. Now, it's important to know it's not the characters that are changing, but the audience that should be doing the changing. A character that goes through like a redemption story, that's all fine and good, but however, the intention of the story should be to change the audience rather than just the character in the story changing. The number 4 is bent. Now, bent stories are a little different than the rest. There's bad is portrayed as good and good is portrayed as bad. And it doesn't matter which side wins, it's just like that moral twist in it that can be confusing. Some examples of this might include Grease, Twilight, Mein Kampf would be just a few examples where the intention of these stories is to lead you to a darker path. But the whole idea of bent is to intentionally make things darker. There's the Billy Joel song, I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints. And that's twisted thinking that misconstrues. Now, these stories can be used to analyze, but you have to have your moral compass point in the right direction. So I would wait to present these stories to your kids until they're at least mid-teenage years, so that you can explain and you can talk to them, hey, like, what did you think about this? Why do you think this is wrong? To talk with your kids about all these issues. Case in point, the movie Grease. The whole entire movie, the girl there is trying to be a good girl, but that by the end of the movie, and she ends up turning to a bad girl, and everybody's cheering her and everything by the end of the movie. So that movie is bent because the morals are misconstrued and they're trying to get you to turn bad. And that kind of story really should be held off for your kids until they're older, where you can talk to your kids and you can explain why these things are the way they are. Now, I can't take credit for these first 4. These first 4 were all presented in the book The Healing Power of Stories by David Taylor, who wrote this book in 1996. Now, when he wrote this book in 1996, I believe after that, there was kind of a shift in stories, which I believe there is a new category, which me and my family thought up here. And this 5th category we called Tangled. And these stories they are confusing. They mix good and they mix bad. It doesn't matter who wins in the end necessarily, but it's super confusing. Some examples would include Despicable Me, who is portraying a bad guy as a good guy. Maleficent kind of follows under that same category. Ocean's 11 and Pirates of the Caribbean are also kind of misconstrued. There's no really good guy and there's no real bad guy. It's just kind of bad guys fighting bad guys. And so these stories aren't necessarily intentionally trying to lead you anywhere. They're just kind of rambling. They don't have any set morals. They're pure fantasy. Now, some of these movies could be just like throwaway movies, but some movies and some stories use this as add complexity to stories. They can be analyzed actually deeply. For instance, the book Road, I would think is not good, not bad. There's good and bad mixed into it, which is actually quite deep. But other stories like Despicable Me, there's not a whole lot of depth to it. It's just silly. When it comes to exposing your kids to these kind of things, use your discretion. Some of these movies are fairly harmless. Some of these movies are not so harmless. So I would recommend just previewing the movie before showing them to your kids. And these are the 5 moral modes that are in stories. I'm going to be inserting these moral codes into the theme section of my Aristotle review videos. And that's the 5 moral modes. Now leave your comments down in the section below. What do you think about these moral codes? Do you think that they're accurate? Are there movies that don't fit into these? Leave your comments and we'll start a discussion. Subscribe, guys, so you don't miss out on anything, and like this video, and we will see you next week. And be kind to each other out there.